So it appears that Kyle Kulinski is currently getting a ton of heat right now for his take on the Ukraine, Russia, US, EU situation. Of course, at this point, and so they're trying to pull them into their sphere of influence, right? Putin has this dream of a new Soviet Union. He wants to retake these areas and keep the control, and he largely has puppet controls in a lot of those countries around, whether it's Kazakhstan or Belarus or whatever, the bordering countries. And so these are kind of supposed to be, buffer states. And so we're somehow still living in this stupid, 1960s Cold War bullshit situation of this is the way it is, and it's very dehumanizing, I think, for these so-called buffer states, Ukraine and different countries like that, as if these people don't have their own right to, self-determination. And I think that's what people are getting pissed off about. Now, here's the thing about Kyle Kulinski. Okay, he is a very, very devoted, anti-interventionist, whatever you would call him. Would you call him an isolationist? I would call him an isolationist. I mean, I think his only provision is like the United Nations taking action in this situation. So he is pretty much an isolationist. I don't think he's rarely ever going to support something like that. Like, I thought that the U.S. keeping those minute amount of troops to, protect the Kurds and, in that northern region, I thought was an important thing to do. But, he's somebody who doesn't support something like that. So that's somewhere I disagree. I don't think it's as black and white as just being completely anti-intervention in every single situation. Or, to me, this is the problem with Kyle. Okay, to me, it's Kyle, like, you kind of know what he's going to say already, and so it just doesn't seem like there's very much thinking going on of any kind. I don't know if there's any thinking going on, because for Kyle, he has a couple of things, and then, for every single issue that comes up, it's just the same position over and over again. So it's principled, supposedly, right? But there's just not much thinking going on. And I think that's what people are pissed off about here. Because Russia is, trying to, take over in Ukraine. They want Ukraine to be part of its buffer zone, as if Ukraine doesn't have the right to self-determination. Like, at the end of the day, these countries, if they want to join NATO, if they want to become more westernized, like a Poland, for example, look at Poland and how these countries don't want Russia's influence, especially in countries like we're seeing with Kazakhstan now. There are these, in Belarus against Lukashenko, there's protests of the younger people who are going on and doing these protests because they want to be more westernized. They don't want to be part of Russia's sphere of influence. What does that tell you when all of these quote-unquote buffer states are essentially revolting against Russia and trying to be more westernized? So that guard is dying off. It should have been long dead by now, but Putin still has this dream of the USSR, and so he's still, trying to make sure that the Kazakhstani dictator stays in place, and same thing with, Lukashenko and Belarus and all of this stuff. Eventually it's going to fall, but regardless, the democratic will of the people, obviously, in these countries is to not, support these kinds of dictators and being part of the Russia sphere of influence. Russia's GDP is like 1.5 trillion or something clownish like that. It's hilariously low. The US is like 28 trillion, China's in the 20 trillions, and then Russia is just Russia. Its entire economy is based on oil. It always has been. And outside of St. Petersburg and Moscow, which are both very nice cities, nobody really has any money in Russia. It's obviously a dictatorship, as you guys know. Now, in this video that he, made, it's called On the Brink of World War III, he says stuff like, one of the things he said is that we made a promise that NATO wouldn't expand. That's actually not true. That promise that NATO would not expand that's not a real thing. That never happened. That's not true. Gorbachev himself came out in an interview and said that that's not true. So that's just outright false. But, he's talking about, what if Russia was giving weapons to Afghanistan, or not to Afghanistan, to Mexico or something like that. Mexico is its own independent country. If Mexico wants to be anti-United States and we invaded Mexico and then Russia was giving supplies, that's fine if they're supporting their right to the democratic will. If that's what Mexicans wanted, that's what I support. And so, you could look at it as like a Cuba situation back then of, Cuba being like a supposed buffer state kind of situation. At the end of the day, you can support Cuba's independence, you can support the hypothetical Mexico's independence, you can support Ukrainian independence and be completely consistent. But what you're seeing with this kind of now is, we're going to support Russia's authoritarianism and disrespecting of the democratic will of the people because the U.S. and the EU have done wrong things, like Iraq, for example, that's completely stupid. That doesn't make any sense. So just because the US and EU have made bad decisions or wrong decisions outright doesn't mean that Putin and Russia's decisions are right or okay. That's just not the way that it works. So you're not being consistent in that situation. And at the end of the day, like I said, like the treatment of these countries is like buffer zones or buffer countries. I think he's even trying to say like a country as like big as Poland, which is hilarious. Poland is a pretty big country and it's pretty developed now because of its ties with the European Union. So Poland is no joke of a country now. They're a serious country. They have a real economy. They have real situation going on down there, again, because of their ties to the EU. I think like even these countries want to join NATO. They want to be part of the EU. They want this kind of stuff. That's their democratic will. That's what they get to do. And so any country that tries to go against the democratic will of a people should be, acted against, period. So he's just kind of wrong on a bunch of stuff. But again, this is kind of what you have to expect from him because he kind of says the same stuff every time, I would say. But not only has this caused a lot of backlash amongst his own fan base, as you can see down here, you can just read these. A bunch of people who are saying that they're Europeans who are laughing about this, or like, wow, you're calling us, buffer states and want to just give us away to Putin and all of this stuff. Even talking about like Poland, a lot of people pissed off about the idea of Poland, being a buffer state and stuff like that. Like Poland is a big country, it's a serious country, it's a developed country. That these countries don't want to be part of Russia's sphere of influence. They don't want to be Putin's, puppet. They don't want that. And there's a reason for that. And so that's their thing, right? So all these countries don't want to be part of it anymore. He's trying to hold on because the longer they hold on, he holds on, that being Putin. But they don't want it anymore. But a huge YouTuber named Adam something went after Kyle specifically. Kyle and Hasan Piker. Now, I'd never heard of Adam something before, but he's a pretty big YouTuber, 637,000 subscribers. If you look at his videos, he does a lot of, I guess, like more videos about central planning or like commie blocks and Tesla cars and stuff like that, but he also makes videos about politics. He's a left-wing guy. I don't know exactly what his political ideology is. If he's a social democrat, is he a socialist? I don't fucking know. But, he's left-wing, I guess. And he posted on his community tab saying, PSA to fellow content creators, especially secular talk, just because you oppose U.S. imperialism, you don't have to downplay or make excuses for Russian imperialism. Thanks. Edit, add Hasanabi to the pile. Holy fuck. So Hasan Piker has always been, I think, more like, he's a Marxist, so I think his sympathies are going to lie more with Russia than the United States. So I think he's going to be more, kind to them than he will the U.S. This kind of effect, I would say, is similar to what we've seen with the video I did recently about how the Breaking Point's audience was polled and basically gave an answer that 90+% said that the Democratic Party was establishment and elitist, but only 55 or something like that said the Republican Party was. And so you over-criticize the Democratic Party, you're rightfully criticizing them, but that's all of your criticism, or most of it, and then people think that the Republican Party isn't as bad. So you're fucking yourself, essentially. This is a similar situation, right? The biggest thing progressive channels will talk about is stuff like U.S. imperialism and, the terrible stuff done in Iraq and Afghanistan and different situations like that, and Libya. And so you look at the U.S. as the grand enemy, and then you just let Russian, imperialism slide. That is, essentially what they're doing is imperialism. They're trying to take over. I mean, again, like they invaded the Donbass region, the eastern part of Ukraine. They want Ukraine to be part of its border state. They're propping up Lukashenko in Belarus when there's tons of protests going on. Same thing right now with the Kazakhstan situation. So why would you let Russian imperialism slide just because the U.S. had done stupid imperialist stuff as well. To be consistent, you would say, I oppose US imperialism and I also oppose Russian imperialism. If you are to support what Russia's doing right now, or like a hands-off approach, essentially what you're saying is you're okay with the democratic will of the people in countries like Ukraine and Poland and these other countries, and the other countries that want to join NATO like Sweden and Finland. Now you're going against their democratic will somehow. I don't know how you do that. At the end of the day, that's the most important thing, a nation's democratic will to do what they want, right? What they themselves want. If they want to be part of NATO, they don't want to be part of Russia's sphere of influence, they have more than the right to do so. And so at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. So you have to oppose both. So Kyle's going to come at it from a perspective of just being anti-intervention in every situation. Hasan Piker is going to be somebody who, I don't know, I guess, I don't know exactly what Hasan said specifically on this subject, but I'm sure he's going to do the thing where you say, oh, US bad, Russia not as bad, or maybe Russia good even. He's obviously somebody who is a Marxist, and so, maybe his sympathies lie more with Russia than they do the United States. So that's his kind of thing that he's going to do. So it's not all that's too surprising. But the people of those countries, we live in the United States, obviously. But people of those countries, almost all of them now, are saying, we do not want to be under the thumb of a 1.7 trillion GDP country. Like, imagine how embarrassing that is. You're part of a buffer state for a nation that has less than a $2 trillion GDP, with like a population of 130 million, like Germany, Japan, all these. I think Italy even has a bigger GDP. Like, think about that. The country of pasta, dude, that's probably their biggest. I'm just kidding. Don't get offended, Italians. But the country of pasta is really they're beating you somehow. And you're supposed to be this big superpower because you spent all this money on the military and you make money from oil. It's just imagine how embarrassing that is. It's one thing, it's not even a big GDP nation in any way. So I don't know what support they can even really give you. But, I think out of something here is right. I think that what Kyle's saying is wrong. Hasan obviously also being wrong on this, but I think Vosh probably has a better take on this. Shout out to the Secular Talk subreddit. That's where I found this. They also over there going after him a lot. A lot of Europeans seem to be really the ones who are really against this because they are closer to Russia. They have more of a pulse on the situation than we do here in the States. We're obviously across the seas. So essentially they're saying I'm just it's very dehumanizing, I think, for a lot of people in these countries because oh, we're just buffer states, our lives don't matter kind of thing. That's kind of thing. We don't get to determine this. And obviously you want to avoid nuclear war. I don't think nuclear war is going to happen from Ukraine, but we should stand with Ukraine, obviously, and we should allow for the democratic will of these countries that are supposed to be quote-unquote buffer states. So, that is the thing. Obviously, we should also try to de-escalate and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, that eastern, curtain or whatever you want to call it, the zone is falling right now. It's falling very fast. Like I said, the Kazakhstani protests that are going on. We saw the Lukashenko protests going on. These are all border countries. Putin himself is actually tanking a bit. And that's why he's doing this in the first place right now, to distract from that. But, at the end of the day, as these quote-unquote buffer states fall, Russia eventually will as well. But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to Russians whether or not they want, Vladimir, Putin. I don't know what they're going to do. Autocracy runs really deep in Russian culture for whatever reason. I don't know why. I guess there was no pluralism or whatever, but, everyone's able to make change. But yeah, so that's what's going on with this Ukraine-Russia situation. Let me know your thoughts on this down below.